Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Kerry Jr. II, in for Robin Vincent. Today on the show, the city of Detroit is suing a blockchain real estate company after many of its properties allegedly violated local safety and health codes.
We speak with a lawyer representing the city on the case.
Plus, we'll hear from former Police Chief James Craig's plans for the city if he's elected mayor.
Also, co-founder of Insane Clown Posse, Violent J, joins the show to talk more about the Juggalo Wrestling Championship.
We'll also discuss WWE and Monday Night Raw heading into town this year.
And what does it take to keep Detroit's most talented in Detroit?
We'll learn more about a new initiative aimed at supporting and uplifting the city's favorite creatives. But first, Detroit used to be known for its high rate of home ownership. But the Great Recession and bankruptcy hit city residents especially hard. And now that's no longer true. About 60% of Detroiters are renters. Because renters don't own their properties, they must depend on the goodwill of landlords. Last week, the city claimed it found a bad actor. Here's Detroit City Councilmember James Tate speaking about the Florida-based blockchain real estate company Real Token at a press conference.
First when I started hearing about what was going on, I was curious. But by the time I got inside of these homes, I was furious and had an opportunity to speak to some of these residents. We're talking about roofs that are leaking, poor sewage leaking in the basements. We have standing water as well in many of the locations. 408 properties, and not one of them has a certification of compliance.
The city of Detroit is suing Real Token because it alleges its properties are not in compliance with basic health and safety requirements. To discuss that lawsuit now, we have Conrad Mallett here. He is the Corporation Counsel for the city of Detroit. Conrad, welcome to the Metro.
Good morning.
Good morning. So the city is claiming that there are health and safety codes that Real Token has violated. What are those health and safety codes that are in violation, and what do these properties look like for tenants?
So we submitted to the court almost 2,500 exhibits. If you look at the Detroit Free Press article, you will see actual pictures of some of the degradation that people in the city of Detroit are being forced to live in. The code requires, number one, that you have a certificate of compliance and that you have then a rental a certificate that says that you are able to rent this property. Now, the code also says that it has to be habitable. When you have a situation where you have roofs leaking, you have sewage in the basement, where you don't have heat, where you don't have lights, these are all violations of the Detroit City Code. As I indicated, if you look at the complaint in what we call our Priority 1 status, there are 53 different properties, all of which we believe, based on the evidence submitted to the court, that they are in gross violation of the city ordinances and that people are living in circumstances violative of their right to public health.
You mentioned the certificate of compliance, right? The Real Token does not have a certificate of compliance, right?
That's right, for any of its properties.
Okay, so don't real estate companies need that to get that from the city? How could that even be possible for them to own over 400 or so properties if they don't even have that?
So, I mean, you know how it works. You advertise a rental property. It largely, in many cases, comes through word of mouth. These are going to be one-to-one transactions. Your friend says John Jones is renting the apartment that he has, renting the house that she owns. You go there. Sometimes you sign a lease, sometimes you don't. And then you're in the property, and the city of Detroit doesn't know anything about it. I mean, it's not an electronic process. It's not digitally driven. It as you pointed out, 60% of the people who live in the city of Detroit are renters. If there's 700,000 people, there's 360,000 people living in rental properties. It overwhelms the city in terms of how we're supposed to manage unless we have the goodwill of the landlords who want to keep their properties in compliance and therefore will voluntarily cooperate with the ordinance structure that we have in place. You can't enforce 100% compliance.
I was going to ask, so it doesn't sound like there is no almost accountability structure for it. It seems like this lawsuit is that accountability when folks kind of skirt the rules if that were to happen? In getting that certificate of compliance.
The issue is, the reason why this lawsuit is so important is because it involves 400 properties.
Yeah, it's a lot of
Think about this for a minute. I mean, if we did it on a one-by-one basis, there's only 8 lawyers in the blight section of the city of Detroit. 8 lawyers would not be able to handle 400 separate cases.
I see.
In this particular instance, we've got them in one place. And that's why this particular lawsuit we think is going to be so effective.
So you mentioned 400 properties. How many people are impacted, and what are those experiences like? What are some of those common experiences? You said you could see photos on the Free Press article. Can you describe what that looks like and tell us how many?
Well,
people?
you've got windows with you've got frames with no windows. You've got sewage in the basement. You have porches with no steps. You've the literally where we had the press conference in an area of Detroit known as Brightmoor. 2 doors down was a real token house. The back of the house had fallen in. I'm not even sure, and so the family was going only in through the front door. Think about this: if there were a fire, how would they get out the back? They couldn't. This is some of the degradation that we're dealing with. This is and the problem is that we did the investigation. Once we saw the outlier article, we became very intrigued and alarmed. We then went through all of the assessor's report painstakingly to find all 400 of these properties related to this particular landowner. We then inspected each one of them. I mean, it took months. This is not, you don't run out and do a house inspection and it's a cursory drive-by view. In many instances, as you might expect, the occupants were unwilling to let the inspector in because they didn't know who they were. Even when you showed them your identification, they're not looking to have a confrontation with the landlord. What they're trying to do is live their lives quietly, and they are very vulnerable and dependent on the city of Detroit finding a way to bring landlords like this to justice.
I want to touch on that point about the vulnerability of these renters, because I'm curious to know whether or not these homes fell into disrepair after these folks moved in, or if that was already the circumstances before they moved in. Do you know any bit about like how much they knew about what these properties were like before they lived there?
So, this is the situation, and you're aware of this. What happens is that the rent that is charged is related to the quality of the housing being offered. And so when someone says to you, I'm going to rent you this property with 3 bedrooms for $200 a month, you know something's up. Because $200 a month is a very, very cheap rent for a property that has 3 bedrooms. So you go in, and then what happens is the person says, I promise to fix this. In 3 weeks, I have vendors who are coming to repair the windows, to replace the water heater, to fix the roof. And then it doesn't happen. And that's the circumstance that you're in. And then what you also really don't have is the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to put my rent in escrow. What the landlords will do, and this is why, thanks to Mary Sheffield, we've got the Right to Counsel program along with the rest of the city council. But the bottom line is that then you go to court, you say to the judge, I'm holding back my rent so that these repairs will be made. Then the landlord says, you know what, Your Honor, I will forego the back rent. I don't want the back rent. I just want this person out. 90 days, the person is out, and the process starts all over. Has the house been repaired? No.
No one's been held accountable. Real quickly though, do we have a sense of how many people are experiencing this?
Oh, if of the 60,000 persons that are renting in this city, clearly 10% of them are going through this every day.
You're listening to The Metro on 101.9 WDET. My name's Kerry Jr. II. My guest is Conrad Mallett. He's representing the city of Detroit, which filed a lawsuit against the blockchain real estate company Real Token. The company's being accused of neglecting hundreds of properties across the city, and the city alleges its properties are not in compliance with basic health and safety requirements. Now, Conrad, I want to discuss the blockchain element to this. Blockchain technology is sometimes used in real estate contracts to essentially cut out the middle man. The idea is to more smoothly make this process go along without any hiccups, the contracts between the buyer and the seller. How does Real Token use blockchains, particularly in their instances?
Well, Kerry, not like you're describing.
Okay.
They use it as an investment tool. What they say is that Mrs. Smith, invest in our company, invest in Real Token, and your investment
point.
And your investment will be paid back to you in cryptocurrency. And because that's the case, if the cryptocurrency then goes up in value, you can see how you're going to double, triple the investment that you've made.
I see. So it's used as a way to get folks to buy in on this investment.
That's right.
More so than it has to do with the actual process of owning
That's
the
right.
homes.
That's right.
So your lawsuit alleges against Real Token, and it's alleging the non-compliance against Real Token and its quote network of shell corporations and affiliates. Who are these kinds of corporations and affiliates? What types of organizations are we talking about?
So these are paper corporations called LLCs. If you look at the complaint, Kerry, there's 160 of them. And what happens is that Real Token is the parent. All of these 160 LLCs own 5 properties, 3 properties, 4 properties. And that's done so that the process of bringing them to justice is all the more difficult, because if I just sued Real Token would say, we own 5 properties. We don't own the remaining 395 that you allege. Well, that's why we had to go painstakingly through the Michigan licensing and regulatory and make sure that we had all 160 of their corporations listed. So we got all of the properties.
And that's primarily, or is it all owned by these corporations? There's no individual actors or investors in Real Token who are also part of or owning.
Well, we are suing the 2 brothers, both John Mark and Remy. We want to hold them personally liable. The law says that if you negligently or intentionally create a nuisance, you are personally liable for the costs associated with your violation of the law. We want to hold them personally liable. We want then to make sure that they are responsible for paying the property taxes. They individually are responsible for the $500,000 in blight tickets that they owe, and that they individually will be responsible for all of the costs associated with repairing these properties.
Is there a precedent for suing a blockchain company that you're looking at elsewhere in the U.S.? Is this happening somewhere?
Well, I think that it not necessarily a blockchain company, but if you remember, Kerry, go back to 2008. You remember and you made reference to it, the whole collapse of the mortgage banking system. That all occurred because people were bundling up mortgages that had little or no chance of ever being paid, and then selling the bundled mortgage package to investors, all of whom bought a piece of it. And then when the market collapsed, the investors were wiped out. The companies that were marketing those particular products also were wiped out. And so you have a situation, this is very similar. What they're doing is saying to their investors, we will give you a piece of the rent that we collect. The reason that they're able to give a return to their investors, an excess of 6%, is because they're not fixing the properties.
Not spending the money on the actual properties themselves. How much do these investors, the LLCs, know about the practices themselves? Are they aware of the fact
we don't know what the investors know. The LLCs, though, all have a resident agent. And so this is not a situation where the Jacobsons or anyone associated with this process can claim we didn't know. Now, the investors are all, frankly, they could be all over the world.
Right.
They don't know, but they're not the ones that we're suing. We're suing the people who are pushing this product and suggesting that this is a way to make money.
What is your interaction with real estate companies that use blockchain generally in the city? Do you find them to be any more negligent than any other real estate firms?
I don't know that there are any other companies that are using blockchain in this particular manner, and I don't know that there are landlords who are using cryptocurrency as payment for the rent that they're charging their tenants. We don't have a window into how much cryptocurrency is being used in what are basically private transactions.
Is there anything about the cryptocurrency, the blockchain, that makes this more susceptible to this type of use?
Gary, let me say this. I don't own any cryptocurrency. I'm not interested in understanding how it works. I have dollar bills in my pocket and credit cards in my wallet. That's enough for me. I know I'm exposing my age at this particular point, but I don't know that cryptocurrency is necessarily a part of the problem here. What I do know is that there are landlords across this city who are abusing their tenants, whose properties are not in compliance with the code, who are renting properties that don't have compliance certificates, and cryptocurrency or not, it's against the law.
According to the reporting by Outlier Media, the city of Detroit once filed suit against several major speculators, but dropped the cases more than a year ago. Here's a reporter, Aaron Mondry, speaking about the cases on our show.
The city gave us a blanket statement about the dismissals. It basically said land contract owners own the homes, so they're responsible for the properties, which is problematic in a number of ways because land contracts themselves were cited in the complaints. The city then said it has been highly focused on commercial blight remediation. Now it's going to focus more on residential blight remediation. That statement doesn't tell us a lot. We know that Michael Kelly and the Hagermans have decreased the size of their portfolio. And then there was another lawsuit filed by private citizens that resolved in 2021 against Michael Kelly, and that required him to standardize all of his land contracts. So all of those things combined, maybe the city felt like it had sort of been able to reduce the impact and damages of Kelly and the Hagermans' business practices. But even so, a lot of housing activists and attorneys said that the fact that the city didn't pursue this lawsuit until its conclusion and try and get some kind of settlement sends a very bad signal to other speculators.
So in summary, after the city of Detroit began its lawsuits, a number of big-time speculators decreased the number of homes they own, and they began cleaning up their business practices. But the city still dropped their cases against some of the worst speculators. Why did the city decide to drop those cases?
So that's really the outside contours, Carrie, of a consent agreement. The bottom line is that at a certain point, you are depending on the person that you're suing to agree to meet the terms of the consent agreement. And unless you've got a situation where you're going to be able to, again, hold them personally liable for what you believe are the damages caused, clearly the city made the decision that getting them to reduce the size of their holdings, getting them to come into compliance, getting them to get their certificates of compliance and come into compliance with the law in the short term was much more beneficial than continuing the lawsuit, which was taking years. Now, what I will also say is that we do have to continue now that we've got Real Token as a renewed focus. Again, we said that we were going to be concentrating more on residential, and we are. Mm-hmm. So we are going to use this as an example of landlords who own numerous properties. We intend very, very much to focus on their holdings, and if they're not in compliance, to bring lawsuits similar to this.
Well, last question for you. I've got about 30 seconds. Going back to the case with Real Token, the city has filed a lawsuit in the Wayne County Circuit Court. What are the next steps, as briefly as you can?
So I'm anxious to share with you the results of their answer. Mm-hmm. I want to see what they say in response to the complaint that we filed. Mm-hmm. We filed last week. They've got 30 days. So I'm really, really interested in seeing what defenses that they offer. Once they do that, at some point within the next 120 days, we'll be in front of a judge. And then the judge is going to say, this is the discovery schedule. This is what happens next.
Awesome. Conrad Mallett represents the city of Detroit, which is suing the real estate platform Real Token for neglecting hundreds of its properties across the city. Conrad, thank you so much for joining us on the show and explaining this.
Thank you, sir.
Coming up, there are a lot of candidates running for mayor in Detroit. We hear about why former Detroit Police Chief James Craig thinks he's the right person for the job. That's next on The Metro. Stay right there.